Public education is the only inheritance that many children in this country could ever hope to get. That's what you get from America. You get public education. Poor, rich, and if you're poor, that's the only one you will ever receive, right? And so I sort of thought of it as my obligation, having received my inheritance, to try my best to contribute to ensuring that the next generation receives its inheritance as well. And it is certainly an tenuous position and growing increasingly a tenuous position in recent years.
I love that phrase, that the idea of it's our inheritance. I really appreciate that. And with that, segue to, can you talk about back to the founding? This is where I just had total gaps in my understanding. Can you describe the major misconceptions that most of us have, and I include myself in that, obviously, about the importance of education to our founding fathers, and how and why free public education became codified in state constitution across the nation? It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of educators on here, and probably many of them have heard of the Northwest Ordinance, and
Mhm.
it's got a lot of confusing land pieces to it. But let's back up to the Constitution first, right? One of the primary things that opponents of public education will say, particularly at the federal level, is that the word
Mm.
education does not appear in the United States Constitution. And what I talk about early in the book is that there's a good reason why it doesn't appear there, because the commitment to public education actually precedes the United States Constitution itself. Oh, wow, that's interesting. But let's even back up before that and say, well, why does it precede it, and why does it end up there? You know, ultimately, we had a number of paranoid white men who were a little bit concerned about handing over political power to regular people. Now, by regular people, they didn't mean women, and they certainly didn't mean black people, but they meant other white people with land, farmers, right? If we're going to let farmers vote on stuff, my goodness, they need to understand the common good. My goodness, they need to be able to read the newspaper. And in fact, if you think about it, right, at that point in time, there would have been absolutely no way for a farmer to have any concept whatsoever of what was happening in Raleigh other than by reading the newspaper or going to the saloon and talking to someone who had read the newspaper, right? And most farmers are busy enough that they didn't spend a lot of time at the saloon. They're on the farm, right? So ultimately, the newspaper and the ability to read are sort of a key piece of this. And so Adams and Jefferson in particular are committed to this idea that turning political power over to regular people means that they will be able to cast the ballot intelligently. Adams writes extensively about the importance of public education. Of course, Jefferson does as well. But Adams writes the 1785 Constitution of Massachusetts, which again precedes our own Constitution. And in it, he put, for the first time in world history, at least the first time that I'm aware of, a constitutional obligation of state government to provide public education to its citizens at common expense.